How's it going, YouTube? Coming today with another video, and today, guys, what the bring to you is the YCS meta shift. I just want to take a moment and say thank you all so very much for making my weekend so special. It was so much fun being able to meet each and every one of you and all the Yugi tubers. It's just something that I wouldn't trade for anything, especially being able to do that for an entire weekend. It was wild. So I also have nationals right around the corner and double regionals this weekend, so it's just gonna keep on going and the grind never stops, you know. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and I just want to make that known because I love what I do and I wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you all. I love you. This is just such a wonderful time. If you haven't already heard, we do have Dragon Shield as a sponsor on the channel now, and that will be in the link in the description below, as well as Imperium Duelist. Thank you both just for being a part of the channel, part of the team. And, you know, today I also want to do a big announcement as well. I've given away Invoke Shaddoll Dogmatica. I've given away Striker. Today, what I'm going to give away is going to be Sun Avalon. So this is a deck that we've seen come into the meta recently because of Therian and Brave. And this is something that I really want to be able to give back to you as well. Just another deck that has a lot of potential in the meta. I'm going to be giving this away at 13,000 subs. So we're not very far off right now. I think we're like 350 away, so definitely go ahead and smash that subscriber button just so we can hit our goal and I can give this amazing deck away as well. I'm very happy because this is one of the decks that I built like 9 months ago, and the fact that it's actually starting to see a lot of competitive play now is really exciting. So this is something that I definitely wanted to go ahead and give away, and it's just another one of those decks that I really do enjoy myself. So it's just another way for me to give something that I personally enjoy back to you guys. So I hope that you enjoy that. Without further ado, let's hop right into the content of what happened during the YCS this weekend. So the first thing that I wanted to just mention is Striker Best deck, let's go, you know? This is something that was really amazing to see. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Mystic Mine won this weekend, but like, listen, Mystic Mine is the best tempo card we've ever received, and just because it's used in a deck like Striker does not mean that it's not also used by many other different decks. Now, Mystic Mine is a card that we just won't see get banned, and it's something that you kind of have to just respect it in the format. It's like Nibiru, right? Like, if Nibiru is hard in the format, you're not just gonna make your plays or make your deck something that just auto loses to that card, unless you're just playing like Salamangreat or a deck that just can't put up an Omni Negate, so they just lose to it, and that's just something they have to like accept. But it's something that is also very avoidable, and you can also like build your side or like main deck like a one-of copy of a back row. And I'm not saying that like Mystic Mine is super healthy for the game, but I also think that it's something that, again, it's one of the best tempo cards we've ever gotten, and a lot of the more control decks that can't really keep up with a lot of the bigger combo decks, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. It's just something that they also need to be able to make sure that they can slow the game down a little bit so they can actually catch up in card advantage as well. Striker is a deck that is very versatile, and it can also just alter itself to the format no matter what it is. So I think that this was an amazing meta call. It's something that I played this weekend, and well, of course I played it this weekend, you know, but it's one of those things that Striker, it just has so much ability to main deck so many toolbox cards. It can go first, it can go second, it doesn't matter if you lose the die roll. It's really, really nice to at least have a deck like this in the game that is not so dependent on, well, I lost the die roll, I'm going to lose. So, you know, big shout out to the winner, Striker Best deck. I'm very happy to see it. But what happened this weekend that was really unusual was, so Despia versus Swordsoul. I called this happening because the Despia deck has a rough time against Swordsoul. And so a lot of people were saying, you know, if everyone's going to play Despia for this event, then we should play Swordsoul to counter that. The problem was half of the room at the YCS was actually Swordsoul. And that's not even like an exaggeration. Like, half of the room was playing Swordsoul, which was insane. This is something that was just kind of a consensus, and everyone's just like, yeah, if this deck beats Despia, then let's just play it. But no one really played Despia. There was I would say about a quarter of the tournament that played Despia, which isn't that much, but it's still notable. It was interesting for me because I reduced my side for Swordsoul because my deck doesn't really have that hard of a time to beat Swordsoul, but I played against a ton. So it was wild because yes, the matchups were pretty easy, but at the same time, you still had to like grind with them sometimes. So reducing my side definitely hurt me a little bit, but I didn't really have to go up against too many Despia, which was pretty wild. And this is something that we just kind of see as like a big meta trend sometimes. And this realistically probably happened just days before the YCS, where everyone's like, you know what? No, Swordsoul's got to be the answer. And we saw a ton of people playing Swordsoul this weekend. And that's to say too, where was Rogue? Because if you ask anyone what they played against this weekend, it was quite literally like Despia, Swordsoul, Theory, and Punk, or something from the meta, and Rogue was almost nowhere to be found, which was insane. You didn't really hear about Salamangreat, you didn't really hear about Invoked. You heard about, again, like Flu, you heard about Drytron, Despia, Swordsoul, etc. All these decks we already expected to do well, but Rogue was really not there. And this is something that I wasn't really ready for because, especially at the YCS level, a lot of times in the earlier rounds, you start playing against a lot of variety. And so seeing that a lot of my matchups, even like the first, I think like 6 rounds was like 2 Despia, 3 Swordsoul. It was really surprising. So this is something that caught a lot of people off guard. But yeah, the Rogue category, it's still trying to find its way this format because I feel like the format's just not really defining itself. So we really have to figure out which of the Rogue decks can still compete. Because it's not really saying that they're bad, but they just don't really have solid builds yet to really be able to keep up with the other decks at the moment. So what was a large impact this weekend though was Theory and Punk, and so specifically the Calamity combo was really popular. And this was pretty interesting though, because the Calamity combo is really fragile, and it loses to quite a bit. Because if you Mystic Mine the board when they have like Hulk Regulus, they're going to go for the Calamity combo. They can't negate Mystic Mine with Regulus, because the second that they use it, nothing happens. It only negates if you use like Tenki and there's an on-activation search effect. It would stop that, but the rest of the effects, like the plus 100, would still stay. So if you just had a simple copy of Mystic Mine to just use on the board, like the Theory and Punk deck just loses. And so we saw some builds that were playing like the Calamity combo, and some that were ending on like the bigger boards. So it was really just a mix of the two, which I thought was really interesting. But this was definitely a deck that was one of the quote-unquote like breakout decks of the weekend, which was really interesting to see because we all talked about it and we all said that the combo, it was a little bit fragile, but I was still able to get Calamity through Droll. And so I think I Droll impermed my opponent and he still was able to Calamity, which was pretty insane, you know? And so that's something that you kind of have to be ready for. I'll be making an updated hand trap guide after this video goes out because there's a lot of different things that I want to mention that I thought were really interesting interactions this weekend, because this format is having so many different tech cards that I feel like there's some that I still gotta mention to make sure that everyone's aware of their options for the format. So the next thing I want to mention here though is going to be the Psychic End Punisher. This card was just super impactful this weekend, like extremely. This card came up a lot, and I kept hearing that a lot of people won their games specifically because of this card. But there was a ruling that came up this weekend that was really interesting, because this card is unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. So there was a Fluanda Reeves player playing against a, I believe, a Theory and Punk deck that put this out. And they had it on the board, but their opponent had like Empen and they had Unexplored Winds, and they were able to send Punisher to the graveyard with Winds and be able to summon another monster, which was pretty insane. So that's something that you should keep in the back of your mind. But other than that, this card was really impactful. The fact that it's just so hard to out, and if you're playing against like Despia and they burn you a lot, or if you're playing against a different deck where they like hit you down to like 1,000 and you make this, it's pretty insane, especially the fact that Swordsoul can make this. And I feel like that might have been a reason why Swordsoul did so well this weekend, as well as the fact that like the deck is just really solid right now, especially if you have a bunch of like the vessels and circles to be able to like with circle dodge different hand traps, and Vessel just be able to put so much pressure on Tenyis. Because I saw a lot of people who were playing like Summon Hara first, and then go into like their level 6, and then if you like token collector them, they go Yazi. So a lot of the hands that I was seeing this weekend were just broken, but at the same time, being able to have a new utility into the extra deck is really impactful. On to the next one though, Top 32, we saw Adagnister and DDD. I thought this was particularly interesting because the Adagnister deck having Heat Soul now is really not that bad. And before, when we were playing it, we saw it do pretty well, honestly, was because a lot of people can't out the towers after game 1, so it just turns into a free game 1, right? Especially because a lot of people are not main decking the rock just yet. So I think that this was still a really solid meta call this weekend. And this is also something that I feel like just has infinite grind game. The ability to have things like double access code in the extra deck and be able to go for game several times is really cool. And the amount of extenders this deck has is insane. So this is something that it's also just very hard to hand trap it too, because like if they open Pakari and they can just go into the infinite anyways, then I feel like they're just going to make the full board regardless. So it's definitely a deck that I could see coming back in the meta pretty hard. Still in the rogue category, but still doing very, very well. The other thing is DDD. DDD has a really hard time against Despia, but the fact that Despia wasn't really prevalent this weekend, I could see why this deck did very well. Gilgamesh Turbo is still very strong. If you don't have the negation for Gilgamesh, it's still going to be OTK. So this is something that I really enjoy as well, because the first turn board of the DDD deck is still really impactful. Also, the ability to just go second is still really nice with Zeus. So it's something that you should just consider, because again, just being able to go like Gilgamesh and then go into your Maki next and then go into Zeus, it's pretty insane. So I hope to see these decks continue to do well, because I always like to see some kind of variety as the format will really start defining itself after this weekend. The next thing here is going to be the Predaplant Branded deck. We saw this in multiples this weekend. And so this deck is really cool because it gives you a lot of different ways to search out different engine pieces. Your end board becomes a lot bigger. You have a lot more ways to poly. So I think that's really nice. But I feel like this build really loses fairly hard to Droll and Rock, because we've not really seen the Despia deck being able to get rocked. But with this build putting up so many monsters and no Omni Negate, we see that a lot now. So this is something where the build still needs a lot of refined work, but I still think that it has a lot of potential. I just think that it's worse than the actual branded deck itself, because of the fact that it does lose so hard to the hand traps that the regular branded deck does not lose to. So again, really cool innovation, but I want to see where the deck really takes itself, because I could see a lot of potential coming out of this as well. So Blizzard is a card that we saw this weekend as well, being a Mystic Mine out. I think that's really cool, just being able to chain it and target Mystic Mine, and then it's just negated for the turn. You can also use this to negate things like Branded Fusion. They get to add it back to their hand, but at the same time, if you're a deck that just kills, right, and you can set this up, and then you can turn 3 just kill, it's something that I feel is really impactful, because negating spell cards, especially against the Despia deck, is just so impactful. So I think this was a really cool tech card this weekend, and this is something that we'll probably end up seeing a lot more coming soon. The next thing here is going to be Nibiru. Nibiru is going back in the main deck. Just keep this in the back of your mind. This is something that will be at 3 in almost everyone's deck. Very, very impactful, and I don't see this changing anytime soon. So this is my top 8 list from the case tourney, and also the list that I took to Hartford. So I really wanted to be able to go second and break as many boards as possible, but unfortunately, cards like Evenly Matched this weekend were very bad. I really did not like that card, and I probably won't play it again, to be honest. It's just something that was really low impact, and every time I saw it, it just really wasn't that good. There's only like one time that it was really funny that I had it, where like my opponent had like a Baron, I impermed it in draw phase, standby phase, he summoned back Moyi reveals summon token, and then I used Evenly and banished his whole board because he had token on it. But other than that, the Evenly matches, it didn't really come up, especially against like Swordsoul. I really wish that I had like Lightning Storm or like Nibiru in the main deck, honestly. I think that would have been just way more impactful. Going second with like the Metaverse as well. The idea was to like just break the board instead of like Metaverse, or to be able to just gain enough advantage to be able to just go ahead and keep the grind game up in my favor. I did reduce my side deck for Swordsoul, but I did feel like it was fine. Even like the 2 D barrier, it still came up enough. Because I want to get enough variety in my hands too. I talked about this before with my ratios like 2s, where you had like 2-2-2, so like you have the best chance of seeing at least one of them, or like 1 in 1 of them in your hand versus like multiple breaks. The same thing with Droll. Droll's really cool, but again, at the same time, being able to get Calamity through a Droll kind of sucked. So I'm definitely going to be overhauling, like I said, this entire deck because I feel like there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot that I got to see this weekend, so I'm very excited to be able to put together the new list because I already have 2 in mind. The other thing that I want to mention is that I actually was planning on playing the 60 card pile with like Therian cards with Striker, and I had an insane build, and it's something that I really wanted to play, but Verte got banned, and so at that point I had to like switch up last second, and so I felt fairly comfortable with going second, which was kind of unfortunate. I feel like it played into this weekend, and it's something that I'm just going to take in consideration for the regionals this weekend, because the build that I wanted to play I couldn't, but I still might try to find a way to do it. We'll just have to see what I come up with, and if you want to be a part of that, definitely go down in the description below. Go follow me on Twitch, because we'll be going to be practicing a lot this week and being able to go over a lot of different builds. So the next thing that I want to bring up here though is that I went to a rivalry event and I won this. So this was very cool, very cool. And so I actually played Starry Night. So the rivalry event is a monotype format. What that means is that you can only use 1 typing in a deck, and then the tournament organizers hand you a deck to play. So my first opponent was playing Lyralisk with like Harpy's Feather, Storm, and Duster. They opened like crazy, they had a nuts board, but what I didn't realize was in the deck that I was given, I had Ties of the Brethren Barrier statue, and I was like, wow, this is nuts. And so I ended up going undefeated with Starry Night. I played against things like Sulfur, I played against even the mirror match, it was wild. I was using like the Starry Dragon and like looping it to get free pops on the board, and had like the, I think it's Ophiel in the graveyard to like keep reborning itself and keep tributing itself for like the Omni Negate trap. And it was a lot of fun, and we can actually start theorying that deck a little bit. If anyone wants to, let me know down in the comments below, because I think that'd be a really fun video to make, to be honest. But without further ado, I hope that you enjoyed the video today, because there's a lot that happened this weekend. So if you want a coaching session over on Metafy, definitely go over there, check it out. If you want to join my Discord, Twitch, Twitter communities, definitely go in the description below. Find those, and I hope that everyone had a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you.